It started with her tone. That sharp, impatient way she said, "Mom, could you not touch things in the kitchen? You'll just make a mess." I remember freezing mid-step, my hand hovering over the handle of my own refrigerator because I couldn't quite believe she was talking to me like that. My daughter, Emma. My only child. She was standing there in the middle of my kitchen, her hair pulled into a sleek bun, a floral scarf tied neatly around her neck like some city executive. Her voice carried a kind of authority that didn't belong in this house. Not toward me, anyway. You know that strange moment when your own child suddenly feels like a stranger? That's what it was. A strange, invisible shift in power. I wanted to say something to remind her whose name was still on the mortgage, whose hands had scrubbed those floors for decades, but instead, I swallowed it down, like I'd done too many times before. Instead, I smiled softly and said, "All right, honey, I was just going to get some ice." She sighed that little exhale of frustration that said, "I can't with you right now." Then she went back to scrolling through her phone. I remember the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the space between us, the faint scent of bleach from her obsessive cleaning. The morning sunlight hitting the tile just right, everything too bright, too polished, too controlled. That day, I realized my home didn't feel like mine anymore. A few weeks before that, Emma had come to stay with me just for a little while. Her words. She'd recently gone through a rough divorce, the kind that leaves bruises you can't see. I was heartbroken for her. She had poured 7 years into that marriage, and when it ended, she came back to me looking so small, so tired. Of course, I opened my door without a second thought. "Stay as long as you need," I told her, touching her cheek. "This is still your home." I meant it. I cooked her favorite meals, washed her clothes, let her sleep late. She needed space to heal, but somewhere between the first week and the fourth, something changed. She started rearranging my house. First it was the furniture, then my kitchen cabinets, then my schedule. She would leave little sticky notes on the fridge. "Mom, please stop buying whole milk. Almond only. Mom, I'll handle the bills now. Don't stress yourself. Mom, don't use the oven until I check the gas." At first, I thought it was sweet, her way of taking care of me. But slowly, it began to feel like I was the guest, and she was the homeowner. She even scolded me for talking too long on the phone with my sister, saying I got too emotional and needed rest. Imagine that your own daughter telling you when to rest in your own house. Still, I told myself she meant well. She had been through so much. Her husband, Paul, was charming when I first met him, the kind of man who smiled with his eyes. But that charm hid a controlling streak that grew darker over time. I'd seen glimpses of it, the way Emma flinched when he spoke sharply, the way she apologized before she even knew what for. So, when she left him, I promised myself I'd give her a safe place to breathe again, but I didn't expect her to bring that same controlling energy here into my kitchen, my walls, my mornings. Sometimes I'd hear her pacing late at night, talking on the phone in hushed tones. Once, I caught her standing in front of the freezer, just staring inside frozen peas, leftovers. Nothing remarkable, but she looked lost. I wanted to ask her what she was looking for, but I didn't. I'd learned that Emma didn't like questions these days. One morning, I woke up to the sound of her yelling downstairs, "Where did you put it, Mom?" I rushed down, still in my nightgown, hair a mess. She was standing in front of the fridge again, doors wide open, hands trembling. "Put what?" I asked, confused. "The container that was here, the blue one." I blinked at her. "Emma, I haven't touched anything. What's wrong?" She shut the freezer door, hard enough to make the magnets fall off. Then she just stared at me. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. She looked almost scared, but of what, I couldn't tell. Finally, she muttered, "Forget it. Just don't move things, okay?" Then she stormed out of the kitchen, leaving her phone buzzing on the counter. I remember standing there, my heart thudding quietly in my chest. That freezer. What was in there that could make her react like that? I told myself not to snoop. Mothers shouldn't invade their children's privacy, especially when they're already fragile. But something about that reaction stayed with me. All day she acted strange, overly cheerful, asking if I wanted to go for a walk, offering to make dinner, something she hadn't done in years. She was trying too hard. By evening, I found myself glancing toward the freezer again. The hum of it filled the quiet. The little frost that gathered along the edges looked almost like lace. I told myself I'd just peek, make sure there wasn't anything expired. But before I could reach for the handle, I heard her voice behind me. "Mom, don't—" I froze. Her tone was low, sharp, almost threatening. I turned slowly. She was standing in the doorway, eyes dark, lips pressed together. "Don't go through my things," she said. "Please, her things. In my freezer." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words just wouldn't come. She walked up, closed the freezer door herself, and said softly, "I'll handle the groceries from now on." And just like that, the matter was closed, at least for her. For me, it was the beginning. The first moment I realized that something much bigger was happening right under my roof. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the house breathe, the creak of the pipes, the faint tick of the old clock in the hallway. I could hear Emma moving around downstairs again, the fridge opening, the rustle of plastic bags, the sound of something heavy being set down. I got out of bed, tiptoed to the stairs, and peeked through the banister. She was kneeling in front of the freezer, her phone light glowing against her face. Her expression wasn't angry this time. It was haunted. She opened the freezer, reached inside, and pulled out that same blue container. For a moment, she just held it, her shoulders shaking like she was crying silently. Then she put it back, wiped her eyes, and went to her room. I stayed frozen on the stairs, staring into that faint blue light of the freezer, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own daughter. The next morning, Emma acted like nothing happened. She came downstairs in her robe, humming softly, hair still damp from her shower. She greeted me with a cheerful, "Good morning, Mom," and kissed my cheek as if she hadn't terrified me 12 hours ago. There was oatmeal on the stove, steel cut, with cinnamon. She'd even sliced bananas on top. "Thought I'd make breakfast today," she said. "You rest?" Her tone was light, pleasant, but I could see the faint puffiness around her eyes. I sat down at the table, pretending not to notice. She talked about little things, a new job posting she was considering, how she might start running again, how she wanted to bring more structure into both our lives. That phrase stuck with me. Structure, that was Paul's word. He used to say it all the time, "Emma, you need structure. We need a structured household." It was strange hearing it in my kitchen again. After breakfast, she collected the bowls quickly, wiping down the counter as though she couldn't bear a single crumb left behind. "Mom," she said, glancing over her shoulder, "don't go grocery shopping this week, okay? I'll take care of it." I nodded, even though I wanted to protest. It felt easier to just let her feel in control. But when she left for her errands, I couldn't help myself. I walked straight to that freezer. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, everything looked ordinary: bags of frozen vegetables, ice trays, a half-eaten pint of vanilla ice cream. But then, tucked in the back corner behind a stack of frozen casseroles, I saw it, the blue container. It was one of those airtight meal prep boxes, the kind she used to pack for Paul's lunches. The lid was slightly frosted, the plastic fogged from the cold. I pulled it out carefully, feeling that chill sting my fingertips. It was heavier than I expected. Inside, I could see something wrapped in layers of aluminum foil. I hesitated, part of me terrified of what I might find. But before I could unwrap it, I heard the sound of a car door outside. Emma was back. I shoved the container back into place, closed the freezer, and turned just in time to see her step through the front door, grocery bags in hand. "Mom!" she called, her voice echoing down the hall. "Yes, sweetheart," I called back, forcing calm. "Just tidying up a bit." She appeared in the kitchen doorway, smiling faintly, but her eyes, they darted toward the freezer, just for a second. Then she looked back at me. Something in her gaze told me she knew. That evening, we sat together on the couch watching a cooking show. Or rather, I pretended to watch. She scrolled on her phone most of the time. The smell of her lavender candle filled the room, that one she said helped with anxiety regulation. At one point, she said softly, "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever keep things you shouldn't?" I turned to her. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "Like mementos. Things from people who hurt you?" Her voice trembled just slightly. I thought about it. "I suppose I used to," I said. "Old letters, photos, even recipes that reminded me of someone I'd rather forget." "Why?" She didn't answer right away. She just nodded, lips pressed together. Then she whispered, "Sometimes it's hard to let go, even when it's ugly." There was a sadness in her tone that broke my heart. I wanted to reach for her hand, but she pulled away before I could. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept replaying her words, ugly things you can't let go of. I couldn't stop thinking about that blue container. By 2 a.m., I made up my mind. I got out of bed quietly, slipped on my robe, and crept downstairs. The moonlight streamed through the kitchen window, silvery and cold. The freezer hummed softly. I opened it again, pulled out the blue container, set it on the counter. For a long time, I just stared at it, listening to the clock tick above the sink. Then I peeled back the lid. The smell hit me first, faint but distinct, metallic, like old coins or rust. Inside the foil, there was fabric, a piece of cloth, dark, soaked, stiffened by time and cold. I unwrapped it slowly, and what I saw made my breath catch. It was a man's shirt, Paul's shirt, the one I'd seen him wear the night of their anniversary dinner 2 years ago, navy blue with small white checks, and across the front of it, a stain. Dark, brownish red, dried blood. I stumbled back, my hands trembling. My first thought was absurd. Maybe it's from a nosebleed. Then maybe she cut her hand. But deep down, I knew this was something else. My knees felt weak. I grabbed the counter for balance, heart pounding so hard I thought it might wake her. Suddenly, I heard her voice behind me. "Mom?" I froze. She was standing in the doorway again, her hair messy, face pale. Her eyes fell on the container in my hands. For a moment, everything was silent. Then she whispered, "You shouldn't have opened that." Her voice cracked, not angry but broken. "Emma," I said, my voice shaking, "what is this?" She didn't answer. She just walked toward me slowly, tears filling her eyes. Then she took the container from my trembling hands, sealed it shut again, and whispered, "Please, just trust me." I wanted to ask her 1,000 questions, but all I could do was whisper, "Did you hurt him?" She flinched. Then, with a voice so soft I almost didn't hear it, she said, "He hurt me first." And then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, alone, staring at that closed freezer door. The next morning, Emma was gone. Her room was empty, closet half full, bed unmade, her suitcase missing, no note, no text, just silence. I called her phone again and again, but it went straight to voicemail. I even called her best friend, Natalie, but she hadn't heard from her either. I sat at the kitchen table all day, staring at the freezer. At one point, I even thought of calling the police, but what would I say? That my daughter left after I found a bloody shirt in my freezer? They'd think I was crazy, so I waited. 2 days passed, then 3. On the 4th day, someone knocked on the door. It was the police. A young officer with kind eyes asked if I was Mrs. Harris, Emma's mother. I nodded, my stomach twisting. He sighed softly and said, "We just need to ask a few questions about your daughter's ex-husband, Paul." And in that moment, I knew whatever was in that freezer was far more than a secret. It was evidence. The police officer's name was Daniels. Young, polite, but sharp, the kind of man who could smile while noticing everything. He stepped inside, wiping his boots on the mat. "Sorry to disturb you, ma'am. We're just trying to get some clarity on a few things." My heart was racing, but I managed to nod. "Of course. Is Emma okay?" He hesitated. "We're just trying to find her right now. She's not in any trouble, but we do need to speak with her." That word "find" made my chest tighten. He looked around the kitchen, eyes lingering for just a second on the freezer, then back to me. "When was the last time you saw your daughter?" I swallowed hard. 2 days ago. She left early in the morning. Didn't say where she was going? Did she take anything with her? Some clothes, maybe? I don't know. He nodded slowly, jotting notes in his pad. Then, almost casually, he said, "You mentioned she was recently divorced, right?" "Yes. Do you know if she's had any contact with her ex-husband lately?" I hesitated, the image of that shirt flashing in my mind. "Not that I know of." He looked up, studying me. "Has your daughter seemed distressed lately or frightened?" "Yes," I said quietly. "To anyone about what you found." "I'm safe. I'll explain soon. I love you. No location, no details, nothing." I stared at the screen for a long time, my tea gone cold. I wanted to reply, to beg her to come home, but a strange instinct stopped me. If she was on the run, maybe she was watching. Maybe she couldn't afford to be traced. So I just whispered into the quiet, "I love you too, baby." Over the next week, the police came by twice more. Each time, Officer Daniels was polite but more insistent. They asked to search the house. I said no, not without a warrant. It felt strange, lying to a police officer. But I couldn't let them find that container, not until I knew the truth. After the second visit, I moved it, wrapped it in towels, hid it inside an old cooler in the garage freezer behind bags of ice. Every time I opened that lid, I felt like I was opening a door to something I couldn't close again. Then, one evening, while I was watering the plants, my phone buzzed. "Unknown number." I hesitated, then answered. "Mom." It was her voice, small, fragile. "Emma?" I gasped. "Where are you?" "I can't tell you that," she whispered. "They're watching everything." "Who's watching?" "Paul's people." Her words tumbled out in short, broken breaths. "He wasn't who you thought he was, Mom. The money, the business, it was all fake. He was involved with something bad. I found proof. That night when we fought, Her voice cracked. "Emma," I said softly, "what happened that night?" Silence. Then she whispered, "He tried to hurt me again. I fought back. He hit his head. I thought he was dead. I felt my whole body go cold." She was sobbing now. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I cleaned up, packed a few things, and Mom, I didn't mean to. "Shh," I said, tears burning my eyes. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay." She breathed hard, sniffling. "Please," she whispered, "don't let them find that shirt. It's all I have left, proof that it was self-defense." And before I could say anything else, the line went dead. That night, I sat in the dark, holding my phone like it was her hand. I wanted to believe her. I did. But something about her story didn't add up. If it was self-defense, why run? Why hide? And what did she mean by Paul's people? The next morning, I got my answer. A black car parked across the street, stayed there all day. No one got out, no one knocked, but when I went to the window, I could feel eyes watching me. When I went outside to get the mail, the car drove off slowly, no license plate on the front. And that night, when I took the trash out, I found a folded piece of paper stuck under the handle of my gate. It said, "Tell your daughter to stop digging, or next time it won't just be her ex who disappears." That was when I realized Emma hadn't just run away from her past, she'd run right into something much darker. And now, it was sitting on my doorstep. I looked toward the garage, where the blue container was hidden under the ice. Whatever truth it held, it wasn't just Emma's secret anymore. It was mine. That night, I barely slept. Every sound felt louder, the creak of the floorboards, the wind scraping against the windows, the hum of the garage freezer in the distance. I kept thinking about that note. The neat handwriting. The calmness of it. Whoever wrote it wasn't panicked. They were confident. And that scared me more than anything. By morning, I decided I couldn't just sit and wait. I called Officer Daniels. He answered on the third ring. "Mrs. Harris?" "Yes, I think someone's been watching my house." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Did you see anyone?" "I'd have written it?" "No," I said. "But I think it's connected to Paul." His brow furrowed. "How so?" I hesitated. Every instinct told me to stay quiet. To protect Emma. But fear won. "Emma told me," I said softly, "that Paul was involved in something illegal. Money, business, I don't know the details. She said she had proof." He studied me for a long moment. "Did she give you anything? Documents, photos?" "No," I lied. He sighed. "Mrs. Harris, I'll have a patrol car drive by for the next few nights. Just as a precaution, thank you," I whispered. When he left, I felt both relief and guilt. Relief because someone was finally taking this seriously. Guilt because I hadn't told him everything about the shirt, the freezer, or Emma's call. That afternoon I went to the garage. The air was cool and still, smelling faintly of oil and detergent. I opened the freezer slowly, my breath catching in the cold mist that escaped. The blue container was still there, tucked behind the bags of ice. But something was different. The towels I'd wrapped around it, they'd been moved. Not by much, just slightly out of place. Someone had been here. My heart started to pound. I turned toward the door, listening. Silence. Then I saw faint footprints on the dusty floor near the freezer. Men's shoes, larger than mine. I backed away, my pulse racing, and locked the garage door behind me. That evening I sat at the kitchen table again, clutching a cup of tea I couldn't bring myself to drink. Emma was in danger. And now, so was I. The next day, I drove into town to clear my head. The autumn air was crisp, the trees a mix of gold and rust. I parked outside a small cafe where Emma and I used to go when she was a teenager, back when our biggest arguments were about curfews and homework. I sat by the window, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching people pass by, and then, across the street, I saw her, Emma. She was wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, her hair pulled back, a small backpack slung over one shoulder. My heart leapt. I stood so fast the chair scraped against the floor. I rushed outside, calling her name. "Emma!" She froze, then turned. For a split second, relief washed over her face. Then fear. "Mom!" she hissed, grabbing my arm, pulling me into a nearby alley. "What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing," I whispered back, trembling. "You disappeared. The police are looking for you, Emma. There's a note. Someone's threatening you." Her eyes darted around nervously. "Keep your voice down. Emma, please, talk to me. What's going on?" She looked torn, like she wanted to tell me everything but didn't know where to begin. Finally, she said, "I found out what Paul was doing. He was laundering money through his company offshore accounts, fake invoices. When I confronted him, he lost control. He said if I opened my mouth, I'd end up like the others." "The others?" She nodded. "He'd done it before, Mom. People who got too close disappeared." I felt my stomach twist. "And that night?" Her eyes filled with tears. "He came after me. He grabbed me by the throat. I fought back. He fell, hit his head on the counter. There was so much blood. I thought he was dead. I panicked. I called 911, but then I hung up. I was scared they wouldn't believe me. So I hid the shirt. It was the only proof of what happened." Her voice broke. "I didn't mean to, Mom. I just didn't know what else to do." I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. She trembled against me. "It's okay," I whispered. "We'll fix this." But when I looked over her shoulder, I saw movement, a man standing at the corner, watching us. "Emma," I whispered, "someone's following you." She turned and her face went white. "Run," she said. We bolted down the alley, weaving between trash cans and delivery crates. I could hear footsteps behind us, fast and heavy. Emma grabbed my hand, pulling me toward a side street. We darted into a parking lot, crouching behind a row of cars. "Who is he?" I whispered. "One of Paul's men," she said breathlessly. "He used to handle the offshore transfers. If he finds me—" She didn't finish. We stayed hidden until the footsteps faded. Finally, she turned to me, her voice shaking. "Mom, you need to go home. Don't tell anyone you saw me. I'm not leaving you. You have to. If they know you're involved, they'll come after you too." I gripped her hands tightly. "Then come with me. We'll go to the police together. Tell them everything." She hesitated. "I can't. Not yet. I need proof. The files are hidden. I just need to get them." "What about the shirt?" I whispered. "It's still in the house." Her eyes widened. "You still have it?" "Yes." She grabbed my arms. "Mom, you have to keep it safe no matter what happens to me. Promise me." I felt tears spill down my cheeks. "Emma, promise me." I nodded. "I promise." She pressed a small flash drive into my hand. "If anything happens to me, give this to Officer Daniels. Only him." Before I could say another word, she pulled away and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there, frozen, clutching that flash drive like it was her heartbeat. When I got home, the house felt different. The curtains fluttered slightly, even though the windows were closed. Something was wrong. I stepped into the kitchen and stopped. The freezer door was open. The blue container was gone. My hands went cold. I ran to the garage, searching, but it was empty. No towels, no ice, nothing. They'd found it, whoever they were. And if they had the shirt, they had Emma's proof. I sank onto the floor, my hands trembling around the flash drive. Somewhere out there, my daughter was alone. And now, the only evidence that could save her was sitting in my palm. I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear exactly, though it lingered, like the faint scent of smoke after a fire, but because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face. The way she'd trembled when she touched that freezer, the way her voice broke when she whispered, "He'll find me." Who was he? And what on earth did Paul have to do with any of it? I sat at the kitchen table long after the house went quiet, the flash drive clutched in my hand like some cursed thing. Its metal was cold, smooth, unassuming, yet it had shattered every illusion I'd had of my home, my peace, my family. At one point, I caught my reflection in the dark window, tired, hollow-eyed, and older than I remembered being. I almost laughed. Look at you, I thought. You raised a daughter who can't stand you, and you can't even understand the mess you're living in. But laughter didn't come. Only silence and the quiet hum of the refrigerator behind me. It was around 3 a.m. when I finally plugged the flash drive into my old laptop. For a second, nothing happened. Then a folder appeared. No labels, no names, just a string of random numbers. Inside it were several video files and a document labeled Receipts. My finger hovered over the mouse. I don't know what I expected, maybe photos, maybe something about Emma's work, but when I clicked the first video, the screen filled with something that made my heart pound. It was Paul, standing in what looked like a basement, whispering into his phone. His voice was low, urgent. She doesn't know, not yet. But she's asking questions. There was a pause. Then, "No, I can handle it. Just make sure the shipment doesn't go through her department again. If she connects it, we're all..." The sound cut out, but I didn't need to hear the rest. I felt cold all over. Paul worked in logistics, something about international supply chains, contracts, and customs inspections. It had always sounded boring to me. But as I watched the next clip, Emma arguing with him in what looked like a parking garage, things began to fall into place. "You're using my ID, Paul, my signature," she shouted, her voice echoing off the concrete. "Do you know what happens if they audit my files?" "You'll be fine," he snapped back. "Just keep your mouth shut. I won't be part of this anymore. Then you'd better disappear for a while." Then the video ended. I stared at the blank screen. Frozen. Disappear. He'd told her to disappear, and she had. Right under my roof. My heart thudded in my chest so hard it hurt. For a long moment I just sat there, whispering her name under my breath like it might pull her into the room. Then I opened the document labeled Receipts. It was a list of transactions, payments from offshore accounts, fake company names, and cargo details. The words meant little to me, but the numbers... Oh, the numbers. They were staggering. Millions. And Emma's name appeared beside several of them, not as the sender, but as the verifying officer. Paul had used her credentials, her career, her trust. Suddenly, everything made sense. The hiding, the fear, the freezer full of food she didn't touch. Emma wasn't just running from heartbreak, she was running from a crime she didn't commit. I covered my mouth with my hand, trying to steady my breathing. If this was true, if Paul had framed her, then the man I'd once considered my son-in-law had destroyed my daughter's life. But part of me still couldn't believe it. I'd known Paul for years. He'd been quiet, polite, always respectful. A little arrogant, maybe, but never cruel. I needed proof, so I called him. It was almost dawn by then. The sky was still dark, but the faintest light brushed the horizon. My hands shook as I dialed. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. "Mrs. Hale? It's early, is everything okay?" "Paul," I said, my voice trembling, "I found something of Emma's. A flash drive, with your face on it." There was silence, long, heavy silence. "Where are you?" he asked finally. "Home," I whispered. "Don't touch anything else. I'm coming over." Before I could respond, he hung up. For a moment, I just stood there, phone still pressed to my ear. Then a cold realization hit me, that tone in his voice. That wasn't surprise, it was control. I rushed to Emma's room, knocking softly. "Sweetheart," I hissed. "Wake up," she stirred, blinking groggily. When I told her Paul was on his way, she went pale. "You called him?" I nodded, shame creeping up my throat. She threw off the blanket, panic flashing in her eyes. "Mom, you shouldn't have. Emma, I didn't know. I just thought he can't see that drive," she shouted, already grabbing her things. "He'll do anything to get it back." Her voice cracked on the word anything. I reached for her arm, but she pulled away, trembling. "Emma, please tell me what's going on." "It's fraud, Mom," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "Millions of dollars worth. He used my login, my access made it look like I approved the transfers. When I found out, he begged me to stay quiet, said he'd fix it. Then one night I came home and my apartment was ransacked. She wiped her face with her sleeve. He knew I was going to the police. So I ran. I felt my knees weaken. Before I could respond, a car pulled into the driveway, headlights slicing through the curtains. "Paul." Emma froze. "Go," I whispered, "out the back." But she shook her head. "He'll follow me." The doorbell rang. The sound was deafening. I looked at her, my little girl, trembling like she used to when she had nightmares, and something inside me hardened. "Get in the basement," I said quietly. "Now." She hesitated, then nodded and slipped down the hall. I opened the door. Paul stood there in his usual neat jacket, but his eyes, they were sharp, calculating. "Morning," he said softly, stepping inside without waiting. "Where's Emma?" "She's not here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked around, his eyes scanning every corner. "You shouldn't have watched those files, Mrs. Hale. They're not what you think." "Oh?" I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "And what do I think they are?" He smiled faintly. "Something dangerous, something that could hurt your daughter." He took a slow step closer. "Give me the drive, and we can make this all disappear." My throat tightened. "You mean her disappear again?" His smile faltered. For a moment we just stood there, the morning light bleeding into the kitchen, his shadow long across the floor. Then I did something I didn't plan. I reached behind me, grabbed the old coffee mug from the counter, and threw it at him. It wasn't bravery, just instinct. He flinched, and I bolted for the stairs. "Emma, run!" I shouted. Behind me, I heard Paul curse, the sound of glass breaking, footsteps pounding after me. I didn't look back. All I could think was that the freezer, that cold humming box, had once been where she hid from the world. But now, I had to help her face it. The chase didn't last long. Not because Paul caught us, but because, for once in my life, I thought ahead. I'd called someone before he arrived. Officer Raymond Harris had lived across the street from me for 15 years. He'd seen Emma grow up, brought casseroles when my husband died, and helped me fix the porch light more times than I could count. When I called him at 5:30 in the morning, half whispering that I needed help, he didn't ask questions. He just said, "Stay inside, Margaret. I'm on my way." So when Paul lunged for the kitchen, grabbing at the counter where the flash drive had been, the door burst open. "Police! Hands where I can see them!" Paul froze. Officer Harris stepped in, his presence filling the doorway. Behind him, the soft glow of dawn spilled over the street, the kind of morning light that should have felt peaceful, but instead just painted every fear sharper. Paul raised his hand slowly, his voice icy calm. "This is a misunderstanding, Ray. Margaret's confused. Step back," Harris said firmly. I could see Paul's jaw tightening, his eyes darting toward the hall where Emma had disappeared. Then, before anyone could stop him, he turned and bolted. Harris was faster. He tackled Paul halfway through the living room, and the two of them crashed into the coffee table, sending the vase of dried flowers flying. I'll never forget the sound, the shattering glass, the low grunt, and then silence. When it was over, Paul lay face down, cuffed, his cheek pressed against the carpet. I stood there trembling, the flash drive clutched in my fist. Emma peeked out from the basement door, her face pale and streaked with tears. Harris looked up at her gently. "It's okay, sweetheart, you're safe now," but she didn't look safe. She looked broken. Hours later, the house was filled with people, officers, detectives, crime scene tape fluttering by the front door. I sat at the kitchen table, The same spot where I'd watched those videos just hours earlier, only now there were papers scattered across the surface reports, evidence tags, statements. Emma sat beside me, silent. Her fingers trembled as she held a cup of tea, untouched. Detective O'Connor. A woman with a kind face and tired eyes spoke gently. "Your son-in-law's been under investigation for a while," she said. "We suspected him of laundering money through a network of shell companies. But we couldn't link him to anyone inside the firm until now." I swallowed hard. "He used my daughter's credentials." O'Connor nodded. "We saw that. The files on this drive, they're enough to bring the entire operation down." I looked at Emma. She still hadn't spoken. Her shoulders were hunched, her eyes hollow. When the detectives finally left, the house felt too quiet again, the kind of quiet that hums with exhaustion. I turned to her gently. "Sweetheart, it's over now." She didn't look up. "It's not," she whispered. "He's ruined my name, Mom. Even if they clear me, I'll always be the girl who signed off on stolen money. My career's gone. My heart ached for her. I wanted to tell her she could rebuild, that time heals everything. But in that moment, even I couldn't believe it. Instead, I reached across the table and held her hand. "Then we start over," I said softly, "right here. Together." She looked at me, her lip trembling, and for the first time in months, she didn't pull away. The next few weeks blurred into a mix of news reports, court dates, and long, quiet nights. Paul was denied bail. The evidence on that flash drive, the videos, the receipts, the recordings painted a picture of fraud, manipulation, and betrayal that even his lawyers couldn't untangle. Neighbors whispered when I went outside. Some asked questions, some just offered casseroles. You'd be surprised how tragedy makes people polite. Emma stayed with me, though she barely left her room at first. She slept late, barely ate, jumped at the sound of the doorbell. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to return to herself. One morning, I found her in the kitchen, frying eggs. It was such an ordinary sight that I stood there and cried. She smiled faintly. "Mom, don't cry. It's just breakfast." But it wasn't. It was a heartbeat, a rhythm, a sign of life returning. A few months later, the trial began. I sat through every day of it, the sterile courtroom, the lawyers' rehearsed arguments, the cold truth of documents projected onto screens. Paul avoided looking at us most of the time. When he did, his expression was unreadable, not anger, not guilt, just emptiness. I wondered, more than once, how two people could share a home, a life, a dream, and still become strangers capable of this. When the verdict came guilty on all counts, I didn't cheer. I didn't even breathe for a few seconds. I just felt tired. Emma cried silently beside me, her shoulders shaking. Afterward, she turned to me. "He took everything from me, Mom." I shook my head. "No, sweetheart, he didn't take you. That's what he wanted, to make you disappear. But you're here." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and rested her forehead against my shoulder. For the first time in years, my daughter let me hold her. In the weeks that followed, things began to settle, not back to normal, but into something new. Emma started volunteering at a legal aid center for women. Women who'd been tricked, framed, or manipulated by partners. She said it helped her make sense of what happened. I watched her from the doorway one afternoon, her laughter soft and tentative as she told one of the other women a story. It wasn't the laughter I remembered from her childhood, but it was real. That was enough. As for me, I found peace in small things again, tending the garden, baking bread, writing letters I'd never send. Sometimes I'd open the freezer and stare at the space where she once hid. The shelves were empty now, save for a bag of peas and a half-melted ice tray. But to me, it wasn't just a freezer anymore. It was a reminder that even the coldest, darkest places can hide something worth saving. It was a Sunday evening when she finally spoke the words I didn't realize I'd been waiting to hear. We were sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip low behind the trees. The cicadas hummed in the distance, and the world felt still. "Mom," she said quietly, "I'm sorry for how I treated you before." I looked at her, her face softer now, the weight she carried finally loosening its grip. "There's nothing to forgive," I said. But she shook her head. No, there is. I blamed you for everything, for things that weren't even your fault. You were just there. And it was easier to be angry than to admit I was scared. I felt tears welling again, but this time they didn't hurt. She reached for my hand. Thank you for not giving up on me. I squeezed her fingers. That's what mothers do. We sat there until the light faded, the world wrapped in the quiet kind of peace that only comes after the storm. The news later said Paul's conviction helped expose a larger corruption network, a victory for justice, they called it. But for me, justice wasn't a headline. It was hearing my daughter's laughter again. It was the sound of her footsteps on the stairs. It was the warmth of her hug after years of cold distance. There's a certain kind of silence that only comes after truth. It's heavier than grief, lighter than peace, a stillness that asks you to listen instead of speak. That's the silence our house knew in the months that followed. No more slammed doors, no raised voices, just the hum of the refrigerator, the clink of a spoon in a mug, the ordinary rhythm of two women learning how to breathe again under the same roof. Emma still carried shadows. You could see them in the way she sometimes stared out the window too long, or how her smile never quite reached her eyes. But she was healing piece by piece. She got a job at a nonprofit downtown, helping companies audit their ethics programs. I laughed when she told me, not because it was funny, but because it was so her. After everything, I said, you're still making sure the bad ones get caught. She grinned. Guess I've had practice. Her laughter that daylight, effortless, felt like a sunrise after a long winter. For me, healing came slower. I'd always been the kind of mother who thought love could fix anything, a scraped knee, a broken heart, a bad decision. I used to believe that if I just loved hard enough, people would stay good. But love isn't a shield. It's a mirror. It shows you who you are when everything else falls apart. And what I saw, in the aftermath of it all, wasn't weakness, it was endurance. I'd faced down a man I once called family, protected a daughter who'd lost her way. And somehow, in the ruins of deceit and fear, we'd built something more honest than we ever had before. Every once in a while, Paul's name would come up, a news article, a court appeal, or some gossip from the neighbors. I never said much about it. Emma didn't either. One evening, though, she asked me, do you think people like him ever regret what they do? I thought for a long time before answering. Maybe, I said finally, but regret isn't the same as change. She nodded slowly, then looked away. Then I hope he never does, she whispered, because if he did, it would mean he finally understood what he took from me, and I don't think I could bear that. There was no bitterness in her tone, just truth, raw, unvarnished. The kind that only comes from someone who has walked through fire and survived. Seasons changed. The garden bloomed again, wilder than before. I started painting small things at first, flowers, old barns, the street corner where my husband once taught Emma to ride her bike. Sometimes she'd sit beside me with a cup of coffee, sketching quietly while I mixed colors. Those afternoons were my favorite, not because of what we said, but because of what we didn't need to say anymore. We'd both learned to stop filling silence with guilt. One night, nearly a year after everything, Emma came home with a box of her old things, the last remnants from her apartment that the police had finally cleared. We sat on the floor going through it. Photographs, notebooks, a cracked snow globe from her childhood. And then she pulled out something wrapped in a faded scarf. It was the flash drive. I froze when I saw it. She smiled softly. Don't worry, it's wiped clean. I just couldn't throw it away. She turned it in her hand, the metal catching the lamplight. It's strange, isn't it? Something so small held so much power. It ruined one life and saved another. I reached out, touched her hand gently. Maybe it didn't ruin anything, sweetheart. Maybe it just revealed what needed to be seen. She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw my little girl again. The one who used to hide under the covers during thunderstorms, clutching her stuffed bear, whispering, "Tell me when it's over." I smiled. It's over now. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I know, Mom, that winter we decided to redo the kitchen. New cabinets, fresh paint. Emma said it was time to get rid of the crime scene energy. I laughed so hard I cried. But when the contractors came to replace the old freezer, I found myself hesitating. "Are you sure?" I asked. She tilt. Her head. Why wouldn't I be? I opened my mouth to answer, but then I realized I couldn't quite explain it. That old freezer had become something sacred, in a strange way. A monument to fear, yes, but also to survival. Still, Emma smiled, and I nodded. "You're right," I said. "Let's start fresh." So we did. But before it was taken away, I touched the lid one last time, the cool metal under my palm, humming faintly. And I whispered, "Thank you." Because sometimes the places that once trapped us are the same ones that teach us how to be free. As months passed, people began to forget. That's the thing about scandals, they burn hot, then fade. Life goes on, quieter but truer. One Sunday morning, I watched Emma in the garden, her hair shining in the sunlight, laughter spilling across the yard as she spoke on the phone with someone new. It wasn't the same as before, it was better, softer, earned. And for the first time in years, I felt something simple and powerful: peace. I once thought motherhood meant keeping your children safe. Now I know it means walking beside them through the dark and trusting they'll find their way back to the light. Sometimes, love isn't about holding on. It's about opening the door, even when you're terrified of what's on the other side. That's what I did the night my daughter opened that freezer. I didn't know what I was stepping into: fear, truth, danger, but I stepped anyway. And maybe that's what love really is, stepping forward. Again and again. Sometimes, the people we love most will hurt us in ways we never saw coming. Sometimes, they'll bring danger right to our doorstep, not out of malice, but out of fear, out of desperation, out of love gone wrong. When my daughter stood in that kitchen, ordering me around like she owned the place, I thought she'd forgotten who I was. But what I didn't see then was that she was fighting for her life. And when she opened that freezer, she wasn't just revealing a hiding place, she was revealing the truth. That night changed us both. It taught me that motherhood doesn't end when your child grows up. It just shifts. It becomes quieter, braver, deeper. It's not about controlling their choices, but standing still when their world collapses and saying, "You're not alone. Not this time." If you're a parent, maybe you've felt that same ache watching your child stumble through something you can't fix. If you're a daughter, maybe you've looked at your mother and thought she couldn't possibly understand. But sometimes, love is understanding without words. It's forgiveness that doesn't need an apology. And when life cracks open the truth, when the freezer door swings wide, the only thing that matters is who's still standing beside you when the cold air hits. Would you have opened the freezer that night? Or would you have walked away? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe every story holds a lesson, don't forget to subscribe.